You know, the Bible is very explicit about catastrophe. And joining us today is a man that you've all seen before, and you've gotten to know him over the years, and I just want to welcome him back again right now. We're going to talk about his latest book, The Wormwood Prophecy, and his name is Tom Horn. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Gary, great to be back with you again. Love the new studio, too, by the way.
Well, thank you, and we do, too. We're very comfortable here. I mentioned the word catastrophe at the beginning of this program because we're going to be talking about catastrophe. The Bible is very explicit. Anyone who has read the book of Revelation understands that catastrophe is biblical. Mm-hmm. And you've written a book about a specific catastrophe that's mentioned in Revelation 8.
Revelation 8, 10 through 11. In fact, it describes it this way: the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. And it's interesting here, by the way, a star fell from heaven. That's the Greek word aster or asteron, from which we make our modern English word asteroid.
Asteroid. Now, it's really no big news that there are asteroids circulating around out there. Mm-hmm. In fact, there's the asteroid belt in the solar system. Mm-hmm. And occasionally, you'll read a little thing in the news that says such and such an asteroid passed within 150,000 miles of the Earth day before yesterday, and nobody thinks about it much.
Right.
But maybe we should.
Yeah, well, kind of what happened to me early in 2019, and by the way, I got to get used to saying last year, 2019.
Yeah, absolutely.
But early in the year, I had something that happened, and it caused me to become more interested in asteroids, especially the asteroid Apophis, which is going to have a near-Earth or Earth impact of all dates, Friday the 13th. Right, in April 2029, so just a bit over 9 years from now. And we can talk about why I became very interested in that asteroid. But yeah, NASA and the NEOWISE team, they track something like 165,000 asteroids that they consider to be NEOs, asteroids that might have even a minimum chance of at some point impacting the Earth.
Let's talk about Apophis, because we have a system here on planet Earth where worldwide astronomers keep track of asteroids. That is to say, there's an asteroid watch, and the orbits of these things are well known in many cases, and they are tracked and logged, and there's a whole network that's designed to watch asteroids or Earth-grazing asteroids or near-Earth asteroids or whatever you want to call them. So it's nothing new, nothing big, but you mentioned one of them named Apophis.
Yeah,
there
Apophis.
Actually is an asteroid out there right now. It's called Apophis. Tell us about that name.
Yeah, Apophis. Well, for me, this was really kind of a personal thing. Can I talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Why I became interested. You may or may not even know this story, Gary. When I was a very young Christian, very, very hungry, basically begging God every day to let me be in the ministry full time, praying all the time. I came home from work one night, went to bed, and the next thing I know, I am standing in front of a brilliant light. Somehow in my mind, I knew this was God. Somehow in my mind, I also knew that he had told me some stuff, but then had also said it was time for me to go back now and that I would not remember. And the last thing I recall was saying, please don't let me forget. Please don't let me forget. And then it was just as if Gary Stearman had kicked me back first out of his Cessna high up in the heavens. I'm falling through the sky. I could literally see this light. Everything's moving away from me very quickly. I can hear the wind moving around me. It was all very vivid, right? And then all of a sudden, the roof of my house goes around me, and I fall on my bed, right? And I sit up in bed, and I take in a deep breath, like that. And now I was awake, no longer in a night vision or whatever term you want to put on it. I'm sitting there trying to get my thoughts around what had just happened. And I hear my wife, my beautiful young wife, Nita, now. I can hear her, and she's sobbing, and she's next to me, and I'm awake now. And I turned and I looked at her and I said, "Babe, what's the matter? What's the matter?" It takes her a minute to collect herself, and finally she says, tells me that she had woke up in the middle of the night and I was dead. No breath, no heartbeat, no pulse, no anything. And she had spent quite a few minutes beating on my chest, trying to get me awake. Well, obviously I had died, I guess, right? And now, I go to my pastor the next day, I tell him what happened. He basically thinks I ate too many chili beans. So I learned really young as a young Christian to be careful who you share things with. They could be supernatural or, metaphysical, beyond natural. So I just hid it all within my heart. But every single day I was praying, what was that about? It didn't make any sense to me at all. Why would God tell you something and then say you're not going to remember? It just didn't make any sense to me at all, right? And so I'm praying about it every day, but it was for the first time in my life, I was actually reading through the Bible, book by book. And one day I happened to be in the book of Job, right? And I'm coming down, first time I've ever read the book of Job. As a young Christian, I'm reading down through here, and these words literally leaped off of the page at me. Job 33:14, "For God speaks once, yea, twice, yet man perceives it not. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he opens the ears of men, and sealeth their instructions within them, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man." Here I was, a young preacher. I knew nothing, right? I was the antithesis of theological knowledge, right? But that I understood instantaneously, exactly what had been said. Information had been sealed within me. He even explains why, by the way, you won't remember. He says that he might withdraw man from his purpose and that he might hide pride from man. Because you know what would have happened as a young Christian?
Sure.
If I had remembered what he told me, by the way. If I would have known then that years later I would be sitting with a man like Gary Stearman doing Christian television, what would I have done? My purpose. I would have aimed at it. I would have been doing everything I could to make it happen, and I would have not have followed the path that he took me down, which was all the life lessons and the struggles and everything else. The other thing he says is to hide pride from man. As a young Christian, I could have been tempted to be lifted up, to think of myself as more than I should. So it made perfect sense to me. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because from that day until now, on a few occasions in my life, it always happens around 2 a.m. In a deep sleep, I go back to that place and information will be given to me. Every time I've written it down, I've given it to my family so they could be my witness. I don't tell anybody else about it. Every time it has happened exactly as I saw that it was happening. But I will give you one quick illustration. Do I have time to do that?
Sure.
One that everybody knows about, you know about. 2010, I go to bed, 2 a.m. in the morning as always, and all of a sudden I see all these dark clouds rising up over the Vatican. And I wake up abruptly, and I know that Pope Benedict XVI is going to resign, and I even know when. I know it's going to happen in April. I know it's going to happen in 2012. Now, I happened to be working with Chris Putnam at the time. Ultimately, our book, Petrus Romanus, came out of that. He did not want me talking about that publicly, but I did it anyway on TV with you, other places, and made that prediction that Pope Benedict is going to retire in April 2012. Now, 2012 comes and goes. It doesn't appear that he's turned in his resignation, right?
It doesn't appear.
But then I was actually really confused because this was the first time I had seen something and it didn't happen. 2013 comes, February, and the Vatican makes an announcement. Pope Benedict XVI has turned in his resignation. And the same day they give an interview their media outlet, the El Observatorio Romano, give a media interview with the New York Times. And that article can still be looked up today and read. And in that article, they admitted that Pope Benedict had actually, officially, secretly, turned in his resignation when he returned from a trip in March of 2012, and it was accepted by the Curia in April of 2012. And Gary, my phone lit up. People from Rome, CNN, MSNBC, everybody wanted me to come on their program to talk about who my insider at the Vatican had been feeding me information. And I turned down all those invitations. I did do TV with you and Sid Roth and Jim Baker and other people, in which, like Sid, he said, boy, you really went out on a limb, but it turns out you were right. And how could you possibly have known that had it not been a God thing? Now, what has that got to do with wormwood? Well, because very early in 2019, 7 years later, here's that number again, a series of sevens, but 7 years later, early in 2019, the most vivid and frankly terrifying vision in the middle of the night, more real than this muted matrix we live in here is.
Yes.
Scared me to the bone, and I won't go into all the details because it's a lot of details. But this one little thing, looking up into the heavens, and what looked to me like a fiery dragon, moving serpent-like, racing towards the earth, right? Then, you know how dreams are, my point of view suddenly changed, and now I'm up above the object looking down at it, and I can see it's not a fiery dragon, it's a giant rock. And it's moving through space, and the way it's turning and the way the sunlight is moving up and down on the grades on it, the contour, it's giving it the appearance that it's moving serpent-like through space, racing towards the earth. Bottom line is, when I woke up, I jumped up, and I almost fell out of bed. I was so scared. Cold sweat, grabbed my paper to start writing down that I keep next to my bed, but it was as if a voice spoke. I don't know if this was just in my head. I really can't say. But one word, Apophis. And the only thing I knew, Gary, I knew that there was an ancient Egyptian chaos dragon, a god of chaos, by the name of Apophis. Didn't really know too much about it. And I knew that NASA had named an asteroid Apophis. Didn't know anything about that. But what I had seen in this dream was definitely an asteroid. It wasn't a giant serpent like I first thought it was. And so I got up out of bed, went to my computer, and that's how all of this got started. I started doing research on the asteroid Apophis, what NASA was saying about it, what they today are saying about it, and other astronomers. And one thing led to the other, which led, of course, to the writing of the book, but also persuaded me that NASA is involved in a cover-up of what they actually know about this space rock.
Now, two or three things. Number one, there actually is an asteroid out there called Apophis. Somebody named it that.
Right.
It'd be interesting to know who named it.
NASA did.
NASA, and when they named it, and why did they choose that name? The other thing is, you had, would you call it a dream or a vision? I don't know which, but it seems like a vision.
Here's the thing. I always try to be really careful about this because I'm a Bible guy, right?
Yeah.
Nothing that we do teaches by any private interpretation, right?
That's true.
And I think you got to be careful when people have personal experiences that you don't build what the Bible has to say around your own personal revelations. It's got to be the other way around. It, at best, maybe, can give us an opportunity to talk to the world. People are more intrigued today with supernaturalism and all this kind of stuff. Netflix is running their Messiah series right now. People are very kind of in tune with the idea that something's happening. And so at best, it gives me an opportunity to be able to talk to the world. But for me, Gary, it was absolutely real, and it made me come to some conclusions in the book that people can read for themselves when they get that from you.
The title of the book, The Wormwood Prophecy, takes you right to Revelation chapter 8, and it takes you into, I'm looking at verse 11, And the name of the star is called wormwood. Now, the Bible goes into great detail, I think, about this star named wormwood. And a great deal of your research deals directly with this name. What's the etymology, the history of how did wormwood ever get attached to an asteroid that may be a contemporary to us out there right now, and maybe a threat to Earth right now? It's called Apophis, which in itself is interesting to me because that's demonic. But the Bible calls it wormwood, and wormwood is commonly used as a kind of an epithet for poison. Like this thing is poisonous, so that when it falls into the water, it poisons the water. And a lot of people have speculated on what kind of poison it is, and so forth and so on. But quite frankly, and I have to share this with you out there right now, I think Tom's very brave to tell us his story. And I hadn't really expected him to tell it to this degree, and I thank you for that, for sharing this, because it brings a reality to our world right now. Particularly when you link wormwood in the Bible with NASA. And you know that people are actually watching what could be the very thing the Bible is talking about.
Right. Well, so here's what I believe. I personally believe that Apophis is more likely than not to strike the earth in a bit over 9 years from right now. And if people buy the book and read it, they'll read all the different reasons why I make that argument, including some, highfalutin brainiacs, right, who happen to agree with me that NASA is actually cooking the books on the threat posed by Apophis. Now, if it does strike the earth, of all dates, Friday the 13th, right, April 2029, if it does strike the earth, I believe that this is the fulfillment of the wormwood prophecy. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I don't set dates, but I'm telling you that this is what I believe, that Apophis will strike the earth, and if it does, I think it's more likely than not that it is the fulfillment of this biblical prophecy. Now, that raises a whole lot of very, very interesting questions.
I can think of about a dozen right now. Right. But we don't have time for a dozen. So I'm going to go back to Revelation 8. And we don't have time to read 8, 1 through 13. But a series of things happen. You have the 7 trumpets sounding, and you have hail and fire mingled with blood. And you have the second angel sounding, and you have something like a mountain falling into the sea. And then another trumpet. And you have a great star from heaven that falls, and it's called wormwood, and in rapid, sequential.
Well, and then the very next trumpet sounds, and darkness covers the sun and the moon. And
which would happen.
And that's exactly right. So, and interestingly, I pastored 25 years. I never read Revelation 8 the way I read it now. And it came out of a conversation with an astronomer, because I was talking about Revelation 8, 10, and 11 only, wormwood. He said, but actually, if you take all of those first 4 trumpets, they're all describing the same. The first debris field that's being pushed out in front of an incoming large asteroid is going to fall to the earth. It's kind of like the Exodus plague, right? So fire falls down to the earth, sets the fields and all that kind of stuff on fire. The very next thing is you have 2 kinds of asteroids. You have an asteroid which is one large body, or you could have a binary asteroid that's actually made up of 2 bodies that are stuck in each other's barycenter, moving towards the Earth. So this could be describing the first part of a binary asteroid that falls. That's the second trumpet. The third one, wormwood, would be the second part of that binary asteroid. Or it could be a large object like Apophis that breaks apart as it enters into the Earth's atmosphere. One part hits the ocean, starts polluting the waters. The other part impacts another part of the Earth, and it's called wormwood. Many people, die as a result of the waters becoming poisoned. And then what happens? The very next trumpet sounds, And when you read the book, you discover that what scientists tell us would happen in the event of something as large as Apophis striking the Earth. First of all, if it hits the ocean waters are just literally going to be boiling, right?
Yes.
It's going to become an aerosol that goes up into the sky. It's going to create hurricane activity, tornadoes on the ground. All this stuff's going to happen, and it's going to raise all this debris up into the sky that will then darken out the sun and the moon.
And
so all four of these trumpets seem to be describing the four phases of a monster asteroid entering into Earth's atmosphere and then impacting the planet.
now, I have to tell you, our audience, that when I read the Wormwood prophecy, it was the first time I had ever considered that Revelation 8 was talking about a sequence of events that are physically linked to each other. And it made a lot of sense. In other words, it just sounds, on a practical level, what would happen if an asteroid actually did approach Earth. And the fourth event here is that the third part of the sun was smitten, third part of the moon, third part of the stars. Mm-hmm. And you think to yourself, that sounds like a debris field blocking out our vision of other astronomical bodies.
Right.
And it would be the final aspect of a four-part event.
In that same sequential order. So that's the other part about how astonishing the Bible is, that what the prophets foresaw, they could explain. If that's what they're describing, then they are describing what would be scientific facts ahead of their own possible knowledge of how those events would play out. But then you go to Revelation 9, the very next chapter, and then what happens? A star, an astron, it says, a star, falls from heaven, but then it personalizes it. It uses a personal pronoun. And to him is given the key to the bottomless pit. And, you know, we've done so many programs on the bottomless pit. They have a king over them in the bottomless pit. It's related to Apollyon or Apollo, right? But in antiquity, one of the other names for Apollo, I think, was Rephteth, if I'm remembering that correctly. And he was a shooting star or a burning asteroid that was moving through the heavens, and he was an omen of coming plagues. And so Apollo is literally a shooting star that is an omen of the coming plagues, which also seems to somehow be connected to the symbolism that is rolling out early in Revelation chapter 8.
Now, we've talked about the Wormwood prophecy, and again, Tom has written this book. I think very bravely has written this book. I'm not sure that if I knew these things, I would do what he has done, because let's face it, we all want to sort of maintain a reputation. We don't want to be called kooks and weirdos or whatever. And yet, if it's been given to you to warn people about this, then we should just shout it from the rooftops. And I think that's what you're doing.
I think, you know, I've often said, why in the world did God show me that Pope Benedict XVI was going to resign the month and the year that he did?
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything? Why did he allow me to know that? Now I think it was because it's one of those things that was absolutely improbable. No pope had done that in over 500 years. The fact that I was the only one that was able to predict it and to the month and year now would cause people with something more important like the Wormwood prophecy to say, well, but wait a minute. What if he's right about this? What if this is actually coming, right? And so it's like pieces in a puzzle, Gary. And the more pieces that get put into the puzzle, the clearer the picture becomes to me. And by the way, people should know, since we're on this program, Apophis was discovered at the Peak, if I'm saying that right, Kitt Peak National Astronomical Facility in 2004. At that time, NASA was saying there was a probability that Apophis was going to impact the Earth. Then they later changed their story. Now, I go into some of the reasons around that in the book. But here's what people need to know about this. The diameter of this asteroid is approximately 370 meters, or 1,200 feet. Or to put that into perspective, since we just came out of the NFL season and the Super Bowl's coming, it is the size of 4 NFL football fields. It weighs an estimated 20 million metric tons. It's moving at 28,000 miles per hour. So this represents something people can't even wrap their mind around what the inertia would represent if something like that impacted the Earth. But NASA has also, first of all, and this always gets me, even though they're now saying they don't think that it's going to hit the Earth, they are saying it's going to come so close it's going to take the satellites out that are in orbit around this planet. Now, I have a lot to say about that. I know we're going to run out of time and don't have time to do it. But if it impacts the Earth, their mapping technology, or their mapping system tells them it'll probably come down around the coastline of Mexico and California. So Marzulli might want to hold up on moving back to California, right? If it impacts the Earth, it's going to be equivalent to over 1 billion tons of TNT. Or to put that into perspective, they say it will be equivalent to 65,000 Hiroshima bombs going off all at one time in one location, or equivalent to almost every nuke on Earth today going off all at the same time.
And it would have the effect, the multiple effects, all mentioned in Revelation 8 in sequential order.
Right.
Wow. We don't have nearly enough time on this program, but it's been great, and we're going to continue this conversation on another one.
Okay.
Listen, how do you feel going out? Does this excite you? Does it make you fearful? How do you?
It's ominous, but on the other hand, Gary, one of the lost messages of the modern church is the imminency of the second coming of Jesus Christ. And when I think about the nearness of the coming of Christ, I get excited.
Well, we couldn't have ended on a better note. I feel the same way. Tom Horn, always a pleasure to talk to him. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.